want to begin with the founders of ICU, Inclusive Cultural University, John and Del Marion. And Del, I'll start with you. We talked earlier. Why did you want to bring everybody together today? You've worked with all these departments already, which is fantastic, in the workshops. Why bring them together at this point?
Well, Ron, because what's going on in our country right now, and it just doesn't seem like we're on the same page, I felt that it was a need for us to kind of jump ahead of our schedule, and there's no better time than right now. I think our state needs us, and I think our country needs us in terms of how to pull this together.
And John, in some earlier interviews that we did for my program and talking to you on Zoom, I'm glad we'll be able to talk here today in person, but you told me on a couple occasions that your efforts are a call to action. You said that a campaign to combat cultural bias, which is a campaign of consciousness. And that kind of talk, as Tony has mentioned to me, his officers particularly, and I'm sure some of yours, some people have seen this as it's a very uncomfortable talk sometimes, isn't it? But it's one that's very necessary.
Yes, I try not to maybe put it and pigeonhole it as just kind of like it's an activist type of campaign of consciousness. I prefer to say it's more like a realist. We just cannot sustain the direction that we're going right now, and it's just so imperative that we leverage the resources that we already have right now, the people that are in the front line. There are things that we have to be mindful of and be conscious of. There's realities that we've all discussed and talked about during the workshops and the sessions of just historically things that have happened, but this is a time that we're kind of in dire needs. And I jokingly say my two sons, who are my supervisors, they're watching me and saying, okay, with you people that are running the world and on the front line, what are we doing to change this narrative, right? And so I understand how important my vessel is. As of right now, given my ethnicity, given my age, the narrative would be that I shouldn't want to have this type of conversation right now. I shouldn't be on this side talking about solutions, but as a realist, that's the only thing that we can do in order to change this narrative and continue this campaign of consciousness.
Chiefs and Tony, I want to phrase it this way. I want each of you to, well, I guess we know the problems. The question is how you put into action and come up with solutions. And we've talked about this many times already, but how do you create change? So I'd like each of you to go over in your mind and tell this audience that what is your main concern and what are your departments doing to adapt to this change. And I think I'm going to begin with Tony because you said to me, Sheriff Thompson, you said to me that law enforcement must change and embrace the cultural change within the profession and connect with all segments of society. So expand on that.
So I think just like ICU, when these two stand in front of my staff and they stand flat-footed and they just hit you with their best shot, you know, they transparently say, here's the fact, you know, we have to own that narrative. We have to own, even though, Derek Chauvin doesn't work for my agency, he represents law enforcement. And as much as we hate watching a video of somebody whose knee is on an African-American black person's neck, we still have to own that represents us. I had a young deputy that made a mistake a little while ago and had to be disciplined for it. And when I was talking with him, I said, listen, you're being disciplined not because I'm frustrated with you, not because I dislike you, but because I love you. I feel like you are the future of my organization, and I want this little misstep to be corrected, to be remediated right now because you are the future of our organization. You are a rock star within this organization, and we need to correct this little problem that you've had, this error in judgment, we need to course correct right now, because in not too many months from now, you're going to be out there on your own making decisions that I have to be able to rely on. I have to be able to trust that we can entrust both our agency's reputation, but all of law enforcement's reputation as well. And so that culture of obligation has to be from the very moment you hire them. And that's hard when you're hiring 21-year-old kids and putting a gun on their hip and then sending them out to go do good things. You know, that's a lot of weight to put on a young person. So when I say that you know, we have to recognize, we have to own it, we have to embrace it. I'm down bodies. I know Chief is down bodies. Nobody wants that kind of obligation now, and I get it. But we don't lower our standards. We still want the cream of the crop. We still want the best of the best, and we still enforce those same kind of standards. We're still disciplining for those dumb little mistakes, those missteps. But we have to have that bigger global kind of recognition that today our communities have changed. The expectations of how we police have changed. Things that might have been acceptable 20 years ago are not acceptable today. And so with all of that comes that obligation to incorporate that into our training methodology, into our organizational climate. You know, all of those things are important. And so it's a challenge from the very top all the way down. You have to lead by example. You have to implement that paradigm shift within your organization, and you have to encourage it all the way through.
With the Black Lives Matter movement last year, and how do you think you've adjusted to it? I know you're facing lawsuits like some of the other cities have, and so how do you remedy what you see as a problem?
About things are different than they were 20 years ago. And our profession needs to evolve, you know, with the climate, with the cultures, with the diversity, you know, in all those different areas. Now, you know, just for the record, most of us were having conversations with ICU long before the tragedy in Minneapolis, and that is a step in the right direction. That's the profession saying, yeah, we understand. We need to take that next step. And with that, what we learned over the summer is, you know, some of these people that are out there, you know, some are just exercising their First Amendment rights, and we need to be able to hear them, and we need to, at some level, be able to understand them. There are others that have different motives, you know, and that's where we have to get back to what we do as a profession, you know, to maintain order. But we have to evolve in so many ways. We have to evolve in the diversity that we hire within our organizations. We have to hire in terms of policies, procedures, practices to make sure that we're meeting those expectations. You know, 30 years ago, the success of a police department was measured by how fast you get to the trips, meaning response times, and what are your clearance rates on follow-up investigations. And if the response times were low and clearance rates were high, wow, you were doing really good. That's not how you're measured anymore. Those things are still very important. But now how you're measured is, what are your relationships in the community? You know, what's your training look like? What do your policies look like? Things like citizen satisfaction surveys. You know, that means something. That's real feedback, you know, that you can work on. You know, things like ICU, things like, you know, the cutting edge, you know, training like implicit bias and de-escalation, those things, those are so important. And the profession isn't hiding from those things. The profession is embracing those things. We want that as bad as the citizens want it. But the evolution of the profession needs to catch up with the evolution of our community and their expectations.
Good answer. These are interesting times, aren't they? And how your department is, you know, you have mainly a white population and a very fast-growing. Even my son even lives out in Joaquin. But so, how does your department handle this, and what changes even in a department like Waukee do you think needs to be?
Absolutely. You know, we don't have the same issues that Des Moines does, Waterloo does, Black Hawk County. Waukee is a growing, thriving community, and it is changing on a daily basis. Not only is the economic, residential, commercial development, but so is the population diversity changing. And we have to prepare our department for that future. And so I've been blessed. I mean, I've known Del for a while, gotten to know him, John also. They've come out, ICU is presented to all members of our department. And that's just a small segment of really the responsibility that we have as leaders to prepare our departments for the future. I mean, truly, we look at two different types of changes for the profession of law enforcement. The first is internal. And that's the responsibility of every single leader here in this room and every leader in law enforcement. It's our responsibility to make sure these changes transpire. And so that starts with the hiring process, it starts with the training, but more than that, it starts with the accountability of our officers. And we have to hold them accountable for the things that they do right, the things that they do wrong. And it's difficult, but it has to be done. The other thing is the external. And Chief Winger is exactly right. Law enforcement changed, and how it changed is based upon really what our mission is, and that is our relationship, the networking, the communication with our community members. That's our focus. It has to be, because that's the only way through transparency in operation, through communication, that we're going to affect this change that's much needed. You're right, it's not fun to sit down and talk about it. We all have other things we'd like to do, but this is our primary focus right now, and it has to be. And that's what the future of law enforcement is all about. And we have to set the standard, and it's got to be a high threshold, because if it isn't, then we fail as leaders. I'm at the end of my career. We talked about how the years of experience here in this room, I'm honored and privileged to be here with each and every member of this group, just because of the fact that the dynamic careers that they've had, such great success. I've seen law enforcement grow. I've seen the change. And to be honest with you, it's for the better. The amount of professionalism that has developed and changed throughout and grown throughout the profession, I'm thoroughly impressed with, and I'm also very impressed with the quality of leadership that has ascended to the tops of law enforcement in Iowa. We do things the right way here. The problem is we do make mistakes, and that's just the human factor in it. But the bottom line is, it starts here, it starts today, and it starts with, action that ICU has presented and other types of services that are presented. So we have a bright future, but we have to continue, and it's a lot of work, a lot of heavy lifting that still has to be done.
Our city with a growing, mainly Hispanic population too. So, what kind of challenges have you been faced with, and particularly in the last 18 months or so, as some of these national incidents really resonate here at home?
We have a very diverse community in Marshalltown. We have a large Latino population. We have a growing refugee population. Over the last 18 months, we haven't experienced a lot of upheaval in our community, because over the last 10 years that I've been the police chief there, we put a lot of work into building relationships, communicating with the public, trying to be a transparent law enforcement agency, and making sure that our cops understand that it's important to have strong relationships with the community. I don't know that, I agree that a lot of things have changed. I've been in the business almost 29 years. A lot of things have changed in this business, but a lot of things have remained the same. I mean, the business has always been about people and the community and building trust in the community and maintaining that trust. And I think about when I was in college and hearing about Sir Robert Peel and him talking about the police of the public and the public of the police. That message still rings true. So we've been blessed to have a good, positive relationship in our community. We've had some uncomfortable conversations over the last 18 months. That's okay. We need to have those conversations, and we're going to continue to have those conversations. I think the biggest challenge that I see is we're asking our cops to do too much, and that's been going on in this country for a long time. And the community's expectations can change sometimes day to day on what they want our cops to do. And as a law enforcement officer working in a rural setting, I mean, we could be doing anything. Like earlier this week, we were chasing chickens, and I also had detectives preparing for a murder trial that's going to happen next week. So, and then everything in between. So it's a complex job that requires complex solutions, multidisciplinary solutions, and too often we're asking cops to do everything, and that's a big mistake. So I think we need to focus more on having discussions about what resources our law enforcement officers need to be successful in the field, and we need to provide those resources instead of cutting away the resources that we provide to them. This coming fiscal year, I'm going to have less money for training, I'm going to have less money for equipment. It's hard to do our job. We're piloting a project with Youth and Shelter Services out of Marshalltown, where we have social workers working in our building every day. We don't have funding for year two. How are we going to keep those programs going? The public wants us to provide certain services. They need to fund those services. So if you want to know what my budget is for community outreach or our Citizens Academy or our social service program, it's zero. We don't get funding for that stuff, so we have to find a way to make it work. So I think law enforcement agencies, and I know the leadership in Iowa of law enforcement agencies, they want to do more, they want to be better, they want to provide better services. We need to have some serious conversations with our elected officials about how we fund those services.
Thank you. When you came to Waterloo a little more than a year ago, I mean, you're the first African-American chief in the city's history, and one of the first things that happened then was the protest, and the first thing you did, and Tony was there too, you went down to Lincoln Park and you met with the people in person, and what has happened since then? What kind of conversations have you had? Is it improving? Have you seen progress? We know a lot of citizen review boards and commissions and reconciliation entities are popping up, but what are you doing specifically, and how do you think it's going?
Well, I think it's important to focus on the fact that not only did we meet with the folks out there protesting, but we marched with the folks that were protesting. We humanized ourselves in their eyes, and that was a big deal for Black Hawk County. That was a big deal for the City of Waterloo Police Department, because we no longer functioned in many senses as an occupying force, making sure that the protests didn't go awry. We were a participant. We said to people we did not endorse what we saw in the George Floyd slaying. We did not condone it, and that's not what we stand for as an organization or an industry. That was an important first step, I believe, for us to build the types of relationships that we need in our community to reduce the flashpoints. And I'll tell you why I think that's so important, because as a police chief, in this era of policing, you have to be very intentional about what you're doing and expect that each officer in their interactions are reducing the possibility that there's some kind of flashpoint that will set the community off and destroy any type of goodwill and trust that you've built. One of the important things from my first day on the job moving forward was really taking a good hard look at our personnel conduct policies, our bias policies, our racial profiling, and attempting to do just what I said, reduce the flashpoints and to reinforce the police officers within the City of Waterloo that the mantra is do it right now.
And you were saying, though, I mean, the whole idea, you're trying to make progress, but as you've mentioned before here, the public today is pretty unforgiving.
Well, making progress is really, in a manner of speaking, how well, and I think one of my predecessors in this conversation hit on it so well, it's how well you're being perceived as a police department. And it all boils down to the amount of procedural justice that you're building within your community, within our community as a police department and community members. Everyone has a responsibility here. Police officers are fond of saying, well, what is the community doing to build the relationship as well? Are they giving us information? Are they working with us? Or they won't work with us? That's something that we hear police officers saying. And in reality, it boils down to what type of soft skills do we have? We have to realize as an industry that we are expected to do the job. no matter where we are, no matter who we're dealing with. And each and every opportunity that we have to meet someone, to provide service to someone, is an opportunity to build the type of trust we need to build intelligence. And if we are not doing that, if we are not looking hard at our personnel policies and saying, we don't expect officers to be curt, we don't expect officers to curse, we don't expect officers to put themselves in a position to make anyone feel belittled, to make anyone feel less than. Something as, formerly innate as saying, hey, have I dealt with you before? Something like, are you on probation and parole, is a flashpoint for people in the community, and is a flashpoint especially for racially polarized members of the community. So getting through to our new era of police officer now, that those type of conversations have to evolve a different way, is paramount to our success as leaders and paramount to our success as police chiefs and police departments. Bringing in ICU to facilitate conversations with officers, having hard conversations about why we think the way we do and why the community thinks the way they do, sitting down and having listening sessions with members of the community and being able to convey to them that we understand that it is not, Tony or I or anybody in this room that, beat people going over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, right? Or, set dogs on people. But there were people in our profession that did this. And we own that piece. We own the fact that people in our profession actually, conducted themselves in that manner, in that atrocious manner. But now we have to reverse that mentality for generations that, went on within communities like Waterloo, where we have a diverse population, and there is a reckoning that has to happen in our community. And that is happening because people are developing a sense of trust in our organization because of the way that they were handled when they were exercising their rights to protest. So from that point forward, we've been really working hand in hand with community members to keep that momentum, to keep that intentional focus upon our behavior and how we interact and what kind of soft skills are being used. And as I mentioned, bringing in ICU for us has been a huge benefit, to sit officers down and put them in really uncomfortable situations. Because let's be honest here, our state is not exactly the most diverse state in the country. So when we hire police officers, we're putting them in situations where they may have never seen anyone that moves their hands like I do, or someone that has the inflection in his voice that I do. And then they may misperceive some of those actions as being aggressive. And what we want to do is get those situations to play out in a setting that's safe, in a setting that teaches everyone that we have subtle differences. But hey, I see you, right? No plug for ICU there, right? But hey, I see you and I understand why you feel the way you do. But this is what we have to do as a law enforcement entity, right? You called us, we are here to help you, but I understand why the distrust is there. And each and every interaction that we have, again, I go back to that word, intentional, right? We have to intentionally take a step back and say to ourselves, we realize people are upset, we understand why you're upset, but we have a job to do, and we see you. And I think that, I know actually, that it's getting better. I know that with the brain trust in this room and the commitment that we all have to ensuring people are treated with decency and respect, that we will get there. It's just a matter of everyone being able to temper it down a bit and understand that this is a work in progress. It's not going to happen overnight, but we are making tremendous inroads as an industry.
Change it up a little bit, right?
Exactly.
I want to be more of a two-way street, and that's what ICU is supposed to be about. I was asked the other day that, again, I have two boys, 9-year-old and 6-year-old, my supervisor. I was told that I was asked if I was going to give them the talk. And the talk has traditionally been about what to do when confronted or in the presence of a law enforcement officer. I told him no, because I wasn't given the talk. This is about respect. And I was told from my father that he didn't get to talk as well. And things were quite a bit different back 100 years ago or so.
My dad was born in 1912.
So therefore, this is about changing the narrative, starting with, and this was before the inception of ICU. And so, I guess my thoughts are, what do you all think about the fact that the talk needs to, or is being perceived that needs to take place, and maybe how to go about positioning the community, who you all are actually wanting to get talented individuals to join law enforcement, to represent the community. How do we go about getting on the same page? And I guess overall, what are your thoughts on that talk?
We've had some difficult conversations in our communities, over the last year and a half. And actually it goes on before that. You'll have that triggering event, and you might get a gut check, you might get a reality check. At the end of it, you need to come out of it better. But there's a lot of hard work being done outside of law enforcement. John and Dell are a testament to that, because it takes courage and commitment to waltz in my office over 3 years ago, sight unseen, never met before, and sit down and start down this road. Didn't know who he was, didn't make any difference. We sat down, I had a cup of coffee, they had a bottle of water, and they told me what they were after. And I was like, okay, they're obviously very passionate. And then the calls keep coming, the visits keep coming, and then I know they're committed. That's hard work. That takes courage to do that, to step in this space, because this isn't easy work. This isn't low-hanging fruit that you guys are after. To your point about how do we get to the point where we don't need to have that talk. Part of that is the evolution of the profession and how we treat people and the expectations of our community. And my community is different than Waterloo and Blackhawk County and Waukee and Marshalltown. But I think as a profession, everybody needs to have the same skills to operate within the profession, regardless of where you work. I think another big step, you look at the mission of ICU, and look at the science behind things like implicit bias. Those are life skills. Those aren't just law enforcement specific, because at the end of the day, I can't control how they treat you when you go to Starbucks. I think some of these interpersonal skills and the mutual respect should be taught in our high schools, because these are things you're going to need for the rest of your life. That understanding, that cultural awareness, that mutual respect, how to treat people, how to be successful, how to communicate. Those are life skills, no different than reading and arithmetic. Those are things that should be taught in our high schools. That would help the profession as people come into it. It would help the general population as they move through school and life and careers. Those are just basic things that we need to recognize and take ownership of and do something about across the board.
One thing, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I agree with that completely. I think those skills need to be taught the day your kids walk into a school, though, period, right?
Yeah.
So I have a son who's in second grade, and he is the minority in his classroom, okay? Because our elementary schools in Marshalltown, many of the classrooms are majority minority. And he's learning some things about culture and about language and about different people that I never had an opportunity to learn growing up here in Iowa. And I think we have lost the ability as a society in general to have respectful conversations. It's all about what I think, what I want, and we don't listen to other people sometimes. And I hate to sound like an old guy, but social media is killing us, because we see the extremes of everything on social media, right? And I think most of us are stuck in the middle. And I think most people in our communities, while they want to see some reform, maybe even a lot of reform with the criminal justice system, they still respect law enforcement. They still support law enforcement. They want to have conversations. But all we see, all we're fed on the national media level and in social media is the extremes on both sides of these issues. So we need to get back to having respectful conversations. And I grew up in a very poor household, had kind of a rough upbringing, but my parents still went out of their way to make sure that I'm treating people with respect and respecting law enforcement, respecting my teachers, respecting my coaches, respecting elders in the community. I think we've lost some of that.
I think to Mike's point too, when all you see is the extremes, right? When social media sensitizes you to the extremes, it normalizes it, right? It makes it normal, and shame on us. Shame on us for sensitizing us and normalizing the extremes. Because once you start getting sensitized to the extremes are not extreme anymore. They're normal. They're common. And that makes our job 12 times more difficult. And again, we police a much different environment today. Obviously, we have a more culturally diverse population, and so we police a little bit differently. We approach that differently. Mike has a much different approach than if you do have a very homogenic, population that all thinks and views things the same way. But knowing that there is this shift, this expectation shift. Was it Cleveland where the officer shot somebody that had the knife, getting ready to stab someone? Columbus. I don't know that there was a law enforcement officer that watched that video that didn't go, shoot, that sucks. Number one, to be in that position, but I don't know that there was a law enforcement officer that walked away that didn't say, what a difficult position to be in, but that was a good shoot. That was an unfortunate position to be in, but that was a good shoot. And the only thing I heard nationally was the outcry, the frustration about having a white officer shoot a black female. And how difficult a position we are in today in an instant to yell 3 times, put it down, put it down, put it down, and have to make that decision. These are the conversations that have to happen today, because tomorrow you may be in that situation.
I gotta say, one of the things that if anything comes out of the conversation from my end is making people understand something, and that is, how would the words "good shoot" play
Right.
in any community right? So, as much as our expectation is.
That was a big catch, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And people don't understand, there's a cultural thing. There are certain type of terms, acronyms that are flashpoints to what you were saying. Procedurally, policy-wise. So I'm gonna let you continue. That was I appreciate it. But before you do that, I have to say this. The real purpose of today, and it had to take place, was to give out solutions. And the fact of the matter is this: what ICU is doing, we're building. It has to be a shared responsibility. Right now, we're putting so much pressure on law enforcement throughout the entire country, and no one. For instance, right now we keep talking about training. Personally, I believe that law enforcement has probably been trained out and overtrained in certain areas. We feel that the community needs to be trained as well. So it has to be a shared responsibility. So the next phase also is for us to have forums that we can bring people in and engage them in terms of the proper engagement of law enforcement. My son mentioned earlier about not getting to talk. My dad was born in 1912. I never got to talk in life. My father taught me about respect. And I've been around law enforcement officers my entire life. And I've seen the bad and the ugly growing up in Chicago West Side. And I survived it.
The community needs to be trained in terms of engagement. I have people that tell me that law enforcement officers are trained to take abuse. I disagree. A law enforcement should not be disrespected because they have a badge, a gun, and a uniform. It's wrong. And so we need to talk about true solutions in terms of changing this up. Go right ahead. Sorry about that.
I agree wholeheartedly. I look at things from both sides, from your side especially, as growing up as being someone who obviously probably had the same type of upbringing. Right? You're a little older than I am, however, I never needed to have that talk. I was always taught to be respectful at all times. You could disagree, but disagree respectfully. So I agree that the training has to happen on both ends, but I can't skirt over the fact that our industry has created a generational inequity, and that generational inequity has taken its form in affecting generations of minority families who have been over-policed, who have been, taken in for minor violations in one end of the city, where another end of the city someone would never be taken in. The example I always use is kids riding dirt bikes, right, in urban communities. They're riding dirt bikes and ATVs, you see it on TV, and the police, we crack down on, people doing that. We know we're not supposed to drive those, we know we're not supposed to do it without a license, and, we go into those communities and we end up taking those bikes and we end up writing tickets that no one can pay, right? And then we go into a golf course community on the other side of our city. And in that golf course community, we got kids that grew up with a bit of privilege, riding golf carts in the middle of the street, doing donuts and blocking highways that they shouldn't be riding their dirt bikes on. Do we enforce those things equally? So the community has a legitimate beef. The legitimate beef stems from years of inequitable treatment that we have to understand first. I think it's our job first as police departments to sort of understand why people are thinking the way they do. If we can understand that, then there's less likelihood that interaction we have will devolve if we've had these conversations with ICU and we've facilitated conversations in the community and made sure our police officers understand why community members feel the way they do. So I think it's a two-way street. I do believe that there is an intensive need for training from both ends. The police department, we're doing our parts as a group here, bringing people in to open our department's eyes to the fact that these generational inequities cause problems. I'll give you another example, and I'm not going to dominate the time, but just recently we stopped two black males. A white officer stopped two black males in a car. They have no tail lights. The legitimate police stop, no tail lights, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, tinted windows, the tent's illegal. They find marijuana on one of the kids who is the driver, and he's saying, why are you stopping me? This, that, and the other. I'm a 3.9 student. I have a scholarship to a huge university here in the state of Iowa, academic scholarship. Kid ends up having, a small amount of marijuana on him. And although he wasn't truthful with the officers in the beginning, our officers walked this whole thing through, checked the car, used a canine on the vehicle, everything else, and found minor paraphernalia, but found some narcotics in this kid's pocket. Do we now arrest this kid for the marijuana, potentially affecting the rest of his life, as a kid who was able to show us on his phone a full scholarship opportunity he had to a big university within the state, or do we use our, what we don't use as often as we should, our ability to assess the situation and determine whether it's the right thing to do for all involved. Now, I'm not going to command an officer to arrest somebody for a minor marijuana violation, but I would ask that after having ICU and having understood some of the nuances about the differences in communities and the reason why people feel the way they do about police, that we think about that situation. Is it a high likelihood that this is going to be prosecuted? Is it something that this kid is going to learn from? Well, I'll take it a step further. They end up seizing this small amount of marijuana, giving the kids a very stern talking to, and letting them go eventually, and saying, you've got a life ahead of you. They actually, to the officer's credit, separate both people. Never talk to each other about what they're going to say to both of these individuals, two white officers at this time now, and talk to them a good 5 minutes about how this can affect your future. I don't think that happens if we hadn't brought in ICU to have these communications to lay the foundation down for at least the officers understanding sort of the social differences that we have and just working through this. Now, when the kids get home, they complain to their parents and tell them a different story, right? And the parents get on the kids, and now we're bringing the kids and the officers back together because we've got it all on video, and we've got a excellent training video, and it's an excellent means by which now we go back to the community and we show the community, hey, we're doing everything that we promised that we do. We're treating people with decency and respect. We're factoring in things that we probably never even factored in before, but giving the community a chance to process this. And that's what I think you're saying, Del and John, that you don't get the opportunity to have these conversations sometimes because we don't recognize the opportunities we give ourselves to show members of the community that it's not all bad, and that you should, in order to reverse the trust problems that we have, we've got to sort of show them that we're being, again, I'll go back to intentional about what we're saying, intentional about seeing you, and intentional about making sure that we reverse some of the negatives that historically have caused, inequities, and I'll say within financial inequities, living inequities with redlining and other things that went on that we had no control over. So I tell that story only to say that, it may never work out perfectly for police officers, right? The kids still went home and told a story about, why they were stopped, because they didn't want to tell the parents that they had a blunt in the car and everything else. But what happens now is that there's a tremendous, there's a tremendous opportunity to bring in the NAACP, to bring in agents of change within the community that that really want to see things evolve, and to demonstrate to them that our commitment is there and we need your commitment as well. And I think that's what Del was saying.
2 quick points. One, and this is what everyone's going to talk about, and I think we got to talk about it, put the elephant out there right now. We got to find a way of not protecting bad officers. Case point. Next week, we will be sitting down with the president of unions for the state of Iowa. Chief Tucker was able to make that arrangement and give me that information. So I was finally able to get an appointment with the president of unions. 2, we as a community have to realize right now, we have crime amongst us. We never talk about that. I grew up in Chicago. I know about crime. I know what crime looks like face up. Shootings, stabbings, whatever. I was stabbed when I was in high school. The fact of the matter is this. We never talk about there's crime. That's the reason that we need law enforcement. Okay? So when we finally come to an agreement that we can start talking about realistically the truth and being honest with each other and look ourselves in the face, then we're going to start coming up with solutions. We got to find a way of removing law enforcement officers that probably have never been law enforcement officers. And we have a laundry list in terms of those folks. The fact of the matter is, too, and we need to start talking about, we have crime in our communities. Does the community want to remove the crime, reduce the crime, or keep the crime? You got to decide on it.
Yeah. I'll jump in there, and I couldn't agree more. Nobody in this room is going to argue that point. And the people that shouldn't be in law enforcement need to be removed from law enforcement. Because at the end of the day, we're running organizations here. And I don't know if you've noticed, but they never fire the guy that's centering the ball. They fire the head coach, when things don't go right. It's the head coach. And what you just said is more important than ever in this day and age, because, as we try and build relationships and trust, it has to start there. It absolutely has to start there. You gotta take care of your team. If you don't take care of the four walls of your building first and get everybody on the same page with the same philosophy, that's in line with the community expectations. If you can't take care of your shop, you can't take care of a community. That's just the long and short of it. And I think now more than ever, you see law enforcement leaders weeding out what isn't necessary or appropriate in their organization to continue to build and foster that philosophy within. Nobody sitting in this room here took the job because, you know, they thought it was a really cool title, you know, or they got the best office in the building. Because I'm telling you, this job isn't worth it. If that's all you wanted out of it, it's not worth it. Absolutely not worth it. You take the job because you absolutely care about the people that work for you. That cops aren't stupid. They'll figure it out in about 5 minutes, whether or not you're legit, whether or not you really care about them. And you take the job because you care about the community you serve. If you don't have those two things, you will fail as a law enforcement leader. And making sure your shop is in order is job number one in that whole scheme, in the success of your career and any trust and relationships you have in your community. It's absolutely the most paramount thing.
Chief, you brought up a good point, and I want my son to chime in on this because he and I worked on this together. We attempted to have a coalition, or better yet, be a part of a group that involved DART, Des Moines schools, and you. And you were the only one that took us serious and wanted to form that coalition. We believe right now that we have individuals that are in key positions right now that, I'll say it, I don't think they know what they're doing. And right now, if you remember right now that when the situation took place downtown with the young people from school congregating at the DART headquarters, and 300 people show up, a fight broke out. My son and I spent countless times down there in meetings with them. Those folks did not want to hear solutions. So right now, another reason that this needs to take place today is because we got solutions, and we need to get people that want to hear those solutions, or they need to get new jobs.
And part of the issue is, and this has been going on for probably since the beginning of law enforcement. You have an issue, throw a cop at it.
Yep. Every time.
And I get it, it's convenient. The population is conditioned to call 911 because they know what happens every time you call 911. Somebody shows up.
Right.
Every single time.
And it doesn't matter what the problem is.
Doesn't matter what the problem is. And we're open 24/7. So you have an issue, you throw a cop at it. Instead of maybe digging down the weeds a little bit and see, why am I having this issue? Do I have an operational need that needs to be addressed? Do I have a business model need that needs to be addressed? You know, or do I just conveniently call 911 and then wash my hands of it and expect the officers to come out there and make the right decision every single time? I think that's an impossible task for our men and women.
And it's wrong, because, and we talked about this during our workshops in regards to how the badge has been placed in very difficult situations, where the questions are about where your parents at, or your guardian. That should be maybe one of the first ones regarding when, especially maybe you're dealing with youth. I'll go back to saying, in regards to the talk, if we're putting men and women in law enforcement in difficult situations that's hard to navigate, when the parent and or guardian might be more well suited to address some of these spats, that's going to perpetuate the issue. People know, in regard to my sons, even though I lovingly call them supervisors, they know who's boss. And if there's an issue, they're going to come to me for me to address it. That starts before they even get into school. Those type of conversations, if that takes place, those responsibilities, and we're talking about really ultimately set rules of engagement. We're talking about human beings. And we have human beings in all professions that are good and bad. Once we can weed out the ones that are not on board, then it's time for us to start uplifting what Chief Fitzgerald discussed, those great interactions, because I'm sure that's not going to go viral, what you discussed.
No, of course not.
And then, because we know the narrative of what's the climate right now, unfortunately, those two individuals still have the audacity to go home and make the bad guy, which could have been something that could have gone viral potentially.
Correct.
It's those situations that's perpetuating the issue. And again, as a realist, that's not sustainable. As a realist, you all mentioned one R word. There's a lot of R words that sometimes discussed about, and race definitely is one that comes up. And we talk about that during the workshops. But one that I heard a lot about today thus far is relationship. And just discussing how can we expedite those positive interactions and relationships. Because it's good to put that one officer out there or a handful of officers out there that they know they have the skills. Is there a way for us to be able to have a simple method of substance to expedite those relationships for the entire force? And that was the solution that I saw, and that I believe that you all saw with ICU being in partnership with law enforcement.
The other thing, and my son just mentioned, and we have to throw this out here because this is dominating our country. The SOR officers right now, and a lot of folks think they need to be removed. We disagree, totally. We've read reports locally, and I read the national report. There's a couple of things that's missing from that report. The position or what law enforcement officers, their input. There's no input from you guys in that report. I will have to talk about Des Moines because I probably have about 20 years of experience in volunteering in Des Moines schools. I haven't seen what the report just indicated in terms of law enforcement officers being removed. I think that right now that we have people getting on the bandwagon. I think that right now that the school boards right now need to probably spend a little bit more time in the schools and less in meetings to really find out what's really going on. Because right now, from what I saw, what I read in the newspaper, we'll talk about the media later. The fact of the matter is this, they're completely offbeat. So I had a conversation with some kids at Hoover High School in 2019. 2020 is like a blow to all of us. We couldn't go anywhere. And these young people told me, if the adults don't care, we don't care. So I think that somebody right now needs to go do some real thorough homework right now to find out what really issues are in terms of really how to fix them. Because right now, what we're doing right now is setting ourselves backwards. So once we get past this pandemic and people are starting to feel safe again, it's going to be crazy in a lot of areas. Schools, universities, wherever. As my son indicated earlier, we have to do a rule of engagement. And right now, that's not being taught. So, you guys tell me what you guys think about them saying that, I think the kids are still in your school, the resource officers are still in your school, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a great relationship with the Waukee Community School District. We just got a brand new 20AD. We expanded from 3 SORs to 4. And they expect to probably expand that just because of the relationship and all the services we provide. But we're very selective on the individuals that go into those schools because they have to meet a certain profile, certain personality, because they have to be extremely good communicators. And they have to be young. They have to be technologically savvy. They have to understand social media. They have to understand the role it plays. But their interactions can really negate a lot of the issues that are being faced. But we do have underlying issues right there associated with the administration of some of the principals and of the schools, just because they feel that it is a school to prison pipeline, and that when law enforcement is there, their biggest concern is that we're going to act on the issues that are faced when we're called into it. It has to be criminal, of course. We're not there to discipline.
Right.
We're there to just act in a law enforcement capacity for enforcing the law. That's our purpose. And we won't get involved in anything else besides that. But the problem is that, I'm gonna get right down to the issue. It gets back to going to the core element. I had the talk from my dad about exactly what you're talking about, because my dad was in law enforcement, and he said the bottom line is you treat people with respect. The way you want to be treated is the way you will treat others, and that was the bottom line. I mean, I couldn't deviate that from that if I wanted. It's not just the profession of law enforcement that's being affected by this. Look at all the educators. I mean, look at all the parents who the kid comes home, tells a story of something that happened, and he's manipulated the truth. I'm not saying he's not he's lying, but and the parents
Sometimes he is.
Let's
just tell the truth.
Call it like it is.
And the parents run right to the teacher and start accusing them about mistreatment, inequitable, all sorts of things, and they take the side of the child instead of realizing that, hey, you know what, my kid might be wrong here. I mean, there was times I got in trouble. I tell my dad about it, and my dad says, "Well, you deserved it. That's the punishment you get." At Catholic school, there was some action taken back on you.
Catholic and public.
Absolutely, and it was justified, and it taught me a lesson. My dad wasn't going to listen to my BS. He was going to act on the truth, and he was going to support those leaders, law enforcement, educators, and that's what it gets down to. It gets down to the home. What are we teaching our kids? We teach them the respect that is necessary for them to be good citizens in the future. That, to me, is where we're failing right now. It's the breakdown of the dynamic of the family unit. There's too many divorces. There's too many single parents. They're stretched to the ninth just based upon the fact that they're working 3 jobs to make sure that their kids have a nice car, good clothes, and all the technology associated with a phone, because that phone is their lifeline. It deals with social media. It deals with every other type of communication that they can dream of. And in fact, you talk about communication skill sets and ills, and I apologize about deviating different subjects, but the bottom line is this: our kids can't communicate. My 2 kids literally would watch TV and text each other sitting next to each other.
I witnessed that.
And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Talk. And that's the problem. These young kids are growing up. They don't know how to look someone in the eye and talk to them. We do, because our profession is, we bring calm to chaos, and it's personal, one-on-one a lot of times. And we're used to those hard conversations, but the young kids aren't. And we've got to change that. And that's where it starts, in the home.
I want to, as the chiefs and the sheriff were talking here, they're talking, I'm thinking, based on some of the comments, that came through, and the story, the chief shared, and the SRO talk. We're at a critical junction in this profession where we're teetering between serving and surviving. Because of, the cancel culture, the sometimes impossible tasks. And I don't think we want to maintain that service mentality, because that puts you in the business for the right reasons. But if our men and women get to that point where, okay, now it's survival, that discretion and that discussion with those 2 kids on that traffic stop, that doesn't happen. Because now if I go by the book, by the policy, by the letter of the law, I'm good. I survived another day, I get another paycheck, I get another year towards my pension. If our folks get to that survival mentality, all those interactions, all those communications and sideline conversations in the schools will end. Because we know what the law is, and our folks are well versed on what our policies are. If we remove that discretion and that interpersonal interaction that can happen on a daily basis by people that are out there all day and all night, the situation we're in now will only get worse.
We become the fire department. We'll sit and wait for calls to happen. That's what's going to happen. And when I talk to
around the country,
it is. And when I talk to some of my cops, why should I go out of my way to be proactive, or why should I go out of my way to be visible in the community when there might be a negative interaction, and all of a sudden, I'm a viral video, right? And we are throwing cops at problems, and unfortunately, too often, by the time the cops get there, the problem's already devolved into something that's very difficult to de-escalate and to control, and we're asking our cops to do impossible things.
Yeah, you're trying to solve a problem that's
Yeah.
existed for months, and here you are in 30
Yeah.
minutes trying to...
Absolutely. So our school resource officer program is also expanding, by the way, because we've had a lot of success in building relationships. And I heard somebody mention, the school to prison pipeline. I think our SROs actually divert people from the criminal justice system because they're working to find solutions and find resources to keep kids from being arrested. If our SRO program went away, every time there's a problem at the high school or we're about to expand into the middle school, they're going to get a new cop that's unfamiliar with the people involved, and more than likely they're going to be by the book, right? And more kids will end up getting arrested. So I think these programs are crucial. And instead of talking about getting rid of them, we need to be talking about how we can give them more resources and expand upon them.
I'm glad you said that, because right now that flows right into drugs and bullying in schools. So one of our focal points is to reduce that. We think we have an idea in terms of how to reduce bullying and drugs in schools, not only in the state of Iowa, but throughout the entire country through this platform. However, we want to empower law enforcement to do their jobs right now. So a few of your resource officers mentioned to me a couple of years ago that they actually want to go back on the street because right now the administration just wanted them to pass out candy and pop. That's basically what they were doing. And so I just don't understand right now in terms of how they become the demon, okay, because you have the largest police department in the state of Iowa, and they want to make a political statement in terms of pulling them out. We all know the writing on the wall. We need the resource officers back in the school, and then we need to start fixing problems, because right now drugs and bullying is an issue in our schools, and no one has the answer. We believe that we have a pathway in terms of reducing that drastically, but we need the officers back in the schools.
If the environment in those schools exists like it does today, without the work of an ICU, that's going to be very difficult to do, because I would struggle right now to find men and women that would willingly and voluntarily fill those roles. You certainly don't want to force somebody into that role if their heart's not in it, because that's not the environment for that. And you look at union contracts, you certainly don't want to draft the least senior person to fill that role, because they haven't developed the skills to do that. So now we're at this almost impossible juncture in this road. Like, how do you reacclimate officers back into the schools? It's going to take a culture change, and it's going to take some tough conversations, about roles and environment, because if the officer in the school becomes a target or a distraction, it's no good for anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody realizes that. Everybody needs to lean a little bit towards the middle here, to get that environment back where it's conducive, it's productive, and it can be of value in those schools.
And I see the purpose is to not look at things very black and white. We're human beings, operating in that gray area. To your all's point about relationships, law enforcement could be very rigid, and no one would like that at all. Right now, what we're really, the basis of what we're getting to is that we're dealing with a heart issue when it comes to us as human beings. Now, no one wants to get all sappy with it, but we can't policy being kind.
No.
And that's what is being attempted. There has to be certain things, and with the ICU platform, an ability to see someone out the gate saying, I'm going to respect you and I'm going to acknowledge you, and to continue that conversation. Because if we can't continue it, and we've seen it, it seems like one day it seems like there's some form of reconciliation, or things are seeming like two polarizing groups are together. But then by next week, then we're at odds again as a society. That's how we lose would be allies to then saying, hey, it's a lose-lose situation.
Another thing too, to piggyback what my son just said, there's a reason that we did not invite the media here. We're going to talk about the elephant in the room right now. So they like to do sound bites. So we plan on having some sessions with them as well. They're chasing the advertising and things of that nature, since I was in the media at one time, and so I know how they operate. And so we're going to certainly need their help in terms of doing that. If not, then we're not going to use them at all. Because right now this has to be a ground root effort in terms of being consistent and being truthful and being honest. And really trying to deliver a message right now is what we want to do.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I have to say this: the media really has to take the message that we're talking about and correct the message.
Correct.
Everyone's a member of the media now.
Good point. Good point.
Having viral videos show up on everyone's cell phone, it's important that the entirety of the message gets out there. We're taught as police chiefs, make sure we upload all our media to Facebook, because you're going to have media members, right, chopping up or editing your piece and only giving the salacious portions of it, the yellow journalism portion of it, rather than giving you a truthful look at what happened in any given situation. So I do blame the media for putting salacious things out there, but they need to assume the role in correcting some of the negative narratives that some of the viral videos perpetuate, because there is truth to a lot of these interactions that does not make it to prime time. And again, punting the football in their direction and making them own the fact that they can do a lot to reduce tension in the community or inflame it. Yes, the match can be lit by any viral video that goes on any day. We know that. But when they perpetuate it by replaying the same, salacious looking cut, that same lawful but awful interaction, right? And show it over and over and over again, and the context given is, well, I don't know about how the police acted, right? It can be inferred, it can be said, but it will, be truth, because it comes out of the mouth of whoever has the 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock or so news. And it really does, they need to realize that there is power, but there used to be honor, and there's no honor anymore. And that's why police officers and police chiefs are very hesitant to work with some media members, because of the fact that, I'm not going to say that police, chiefs in general have been burned, but I think the industry has been burned. We've done it to ourselves to a certain degree, but knowing now that we're trying to reverse this trend and hopping on the viral video bandwagon are two different things, and we have to make media members sort of accountable for that.
I'm going to piggyback that. 2017. My son and I, and an organization we belong to, was responsible for bringing 1,000 people of color to Des Moines downtown for 4 days. College-educated PhDs, suit and tie, on a conference. We couldn't get the media to cover that. But if there are 4 young men downtown with their pants sagging, they get in a little bit of trouble. That's going to make front page, to your point. The other thing, too, we want to address, we want to have some conversation right now in terms of people of color wanting to enter this profession. We have a tremendously huge issue in our country right now. I don't mind mentioning that my son, Montel, who used wrestling at the University of Iowa, has taken the test and is ready to be a law enforcement officer. Hopefully he passes through everything. But the first time he went through, Chief, he attempted to apply for Des Moines and was disqualified because he had a tattoo. And the tattoo, you couldn't see it unless he raised his neck up because it went above his shirt line. I think that also, too, we need to take a look at a few things in terms of, especially in terms of how we're progressing as a society. and things that are success. I mean, I'm sure if you guys have any tattoos at all. I don't have any tattoos.
I have one, and tell your son we take tattoos.
Okay. I don't have any tattoos.
And we take tattoos.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm old fashioned. I don't get with it.
I've got about 8 tattoos.
We take tattoos too. I'm gonna
Well,
take
yeah,
all that.
but he was disqualified because he had a tattoo. Okay, my wife and I were out of town. He called me from out of town. He was distressed because I talked him into it, but you know, he's back in the system again. The bottom line is this right here. And as my son has indicated too, and my grandson wanted to be law enforcement officers at some point in time. We're not going to shun law enforcement because we got some bad officers. But we have to find a way of getting people in the community in terms of wanting to be a part of law enforcement too, especially in the state of Iowa. When we say that, we want more people of color. We have to want to be able to embrace as well. And that's the solution right there. If you want to be a part of your community and have some say-so, you got to get involved. It's as simple as that. And that's what my dad has preached to me in my entire life. And so I know my son feels the same way, but that's something that certainly needs to address. But once again, I'm hoping that my son will be law enforcement before the end of the year.
Nobody wants a job right now, though. I don't care what the demographics are. Nobody wants a job right now. Okay,
I know.
I'm hiring 3 people this year. We just closed an application period. I had 10 applicants. We're not going to find 3 people with 10 applicants. Okay, nobody wants a job, and part of their and that's it. This problem just didn't start 18 months ago.
No.
Okay, this has been a problem. I've been a chief for 17 years. This has been a problem for at least that long, probably longer than that, here in Iowa. And we're not making it any easier, though, for people wanting to join the profession, because we have spent the last year and a half vilifying everybody that wears this uniform, okay, and trying to lump everybody in. So what happened in Minneapolis was awful. It was a crime. It was murder. But Derek Chauvin does not represent everybody that wears a uniform in this country. And we have to do a better job, I think, as law enforcement leaders with being deliberate and consistent with our message about what this profession is truly about, what we really do every day. I talked to a Rotary in Marshalltown yesterday, and everybody calls us law enforcement, but I mean, honestly, how much time do we spend on law enforcement, right? It's 20%, if that, right? 80% of what my cops do every day is social work. And so we're bringing in some very talented, highly educated people. But right now, if I'm a young person and I look at what's going on with the vilification of this profession in this country, why would I sign up for nights, weekends, and holidays, and oh, by the way, everybody's going to hate me? Or I'm going to think that, right? Everybody doesn't hate us, by the way. Most people don't. But it's just been very negative in the public spotlight about this career. And we do need to do a better job as a profession. I mean, getting out in the communities and talking about what we do and how you can be part of the solutions in our community. It's been a big struggle, though, to find people that want the job.
To John and Del's point, though, it is accepted differently when it's delivered by someone that looks like them, walks like them, and talks like them, and that's a shame.
Yeah.
Because we have to get to the point where no matter who the police chief is, if they're extending themselves and trying to make inroads in the community, that we believe that the move towards a great relationship is legitimate. And it's a shame that we have to cajole people into understanding that, hey, we mean this. We want to be in better communication with you. We want to have that kind of relationship where you can send us your best and brightest to be part of the change that you want to see in your community. But we're at a point now where folks, and especially in minority neighborhoods, don't want to hear it from people that don't look like them, walk like them, or talk like them, and that's unfortunate. But that's the reality of where we are, and it may take a little more effort from the part of people who don't look like me to make people who do look like me trust in them again, if they ever did at all. And I'm hopeful, though, that changes. I believe that there is an emphasis placed on each one of our agencies, and that comes from the top, your leadership, to ensure that people trust everyone in the communities that we serve, trust us. So it's going to take a lot of work, but we're up to it.
Another solution that I really feel I need to throw out on the table, a lot of us have talked about this before, like to talk about it right now. My son and I have done a tremendous amount of ride-alongs. And we are going to, we've been working on this effort now for probably about 3.5, 4 years, contacting NFL, because the NFL has gotten themselves into this arena. We understand why. We understand why the players are kneeling. We understand why people are upset about players kneeling. We feel that our solution, our platform being in front of the NFL will give the players what they're looking for, as well as the owners what they're looking for. And more importantly, too, the only way you're going to accomplish that is that you have to build relationships. And we believe that we know how to show them how to do that. And that's extremely important.
ICU is a platform that is meant to create safe zones, safe areas to have these type of dialogues. The fact of the matter is that I personally feel is the business is the highest priority right now to get us to be able to coexist. And that seems pretty simple, however it's not happening, right? The true solution, and this is straight fact. There are individuals that they're outliers within the law enforcement profession. And we need to be able to get the law enforcement individuals, departments and agencies that don't support those outliers to be able to be differentiated from them, to be separate from them. How can we be able to get you all to be separated from those individuals to continue to support what the profession was meant to be, and that's to protect and serve? Because right now, we're being conditioned that all law enforcement is being clumped in right all together, right? And they see one act that's egregious, then that's all. And when I see videos, and I personally, I admit I don't have the stomach to really watch a lot of news too often anymore, but my father's my chief consultant, does a good job keeping me leaned in on that stuff. And I see at times no real interaction, but at times from the public, things being yelled at law enforcement to kind of have things, aggression in particular, and maybe specifically to perpetuate issues. That's just going to continue to fester when it comes to just human-to-human interaction, right? So there's a dire need to be able to say, hey, we see what's taking place or what this incident is, and we are not a part of that culture. You see me?
I like the fact that you talk about next steps, right? And that creating that additional dialogue, that additional understanding. So when I use a vernacular like a good shoot, right? It's not, hey, good that she was shot. It's that when we look at the totality of the situation, we weigh what would a prudent and reasonable officer do in the same situation. Mm-hmm. That sucks that he's put in that situation. But when you create that dialogue, that methodology of understanding, that when that vernacular is used, now we're creating a higher level of understanding of what that good and prudent officer sees, comprehends, digests, and assimilates. Mm-hmm. And all of that dialogue, all of that respect, all of that level of understanding is critical. Because otherwise, what you have are those shouts and those arguments and those ignorant levels of of limitations of understanding. And I think again, we've predicated some of that over the year because we've had arguments with the media. They didn't cover us well. We're not going to share information with them. We're going to keep it tight-vested, and so we're going to turtle up as an organization or as a profession. We're going to protect ourselves because we've not been treated fairly, because we've not been portrayed in favorable light. We have not done a good job of outreach, of public relations. When we're not social workers, we're marketers, we're public relations specialists, we're all these other things that are not traditional roles of law enforcement. And so all of that, we're asked to be a jack of all trades. Well, we're asked to be experts of several things that we were never good at anyway, and not traditional roles of law enforcement either. So I think that next evolution of ICU is of critical need too, so that we can get that next level of dialogue, that next level of understanding.
Proactively facilitating those conversations.
Absolutely.
Is what you're pretty much saying. I think that sounds like an excellent idea.
Yeah.
Chief Tupper provides me, whenever a law enforcement officer loses their life. And we would like to work to a point that people care when someone loses their life, no matter who they are and what color they are. But we live in a society right now that a number of people feel like, okay, we got to win because that person lost their life. That's wrong. We got to care. The other thing too is, and my concern is, I've had conversations with people that say, well, I can do wrong as long as I don't get caught. I remember when we did the work up in Waterloo, and I got a tour of a warehouse in Waterloo that was housed with 3 rooms. One was full of drugs. They didn't have any more space. It was a warehouse. One full of guns, no space. And then I saw over $1 million in cash for the first time. Cash that was taken off the streets. We have to look at both sides of this coin in terms of how we're going to progress as a society. And for whatever reason right now, it appears, and that's the reason that we stay away from the politics, stay away from the religion. We got to stay right in the middle of the road in terms of what type of society we want to have. And that's the focus that we keep, and we're going to stay with the entire time, right? Especially when my son created this platform, I said, as long as we're going to accomplish something and we're doing it the right way, I'm all in. And I think we're doing it the right way.
I think getting the public more involved with what we're doing in law enforcement is critical. I think our society has, for far too long now, they want governments to take care of everything, and they don't accept any responsibility for what's going on in their neighborhoods. They call the cops. And I always tell people, I work for you, but everybody in this community has a responsibility for the policing that occurs in this community. We have to work together. We have to be willing to have difficult conversations. We have to work together to solve problems, and not just, oftentimes we had a horrible murder case a little over a year ago where to this day I know there's people in that neighborhood that know what happened. But, they tell us, hey, you're the cop, go do your job. Well, we're not superheroes. We don't have special powers. We can't read people's minds. We need the public working with us. And we have a responsibility to make people feel comfortable and safe in doing so and giving them an avenue to do so. But everybody has to step up to that responsibility of policing in their communities as well. And I think what ICU offers us is an opportunity to build a bridge with the community, to open up some lines of communication that maybe haven't existed in the past. But we all have to be willing to walk across that bridge and meet each other in the middle.
I think Chief Fitzgerald touched on it, and I'm going to trademark it so you guys can't have it. But it's be the change that you want to see, whether that's as an applicant or as a community member. You're purposely investing. You're purposely making that investment in the change that you want to see, whether it's in your department or in your community.
Yeah, I want to go back to, we discussed a little bit about unions and getting rid of people that shouldn't belong in the profession. I think everybody here believes in that. I think it's difficult sometimes for sheriffs, police chiefs to do what needs to be done. And when it comes to hiring and firing and promotions, I don't have as much authority in my department as you might think that I do. And there's a lot of bureaucratic hoops I have to jump through to hire somebody, to fire somebody, or to promote somebody. And sometimes I don't always get what I want. And I think Bill Parcells once said, if you're gonna ask me to cook the dinner, allow me to buy some of the groceries for that dinner. Okay, I think police chiefs and sheriffs seem to have more ability to find the people that they need to bring on the bus, and then to make sure that they have the right people in the right seats on the bus. And we don't always have that authority. And when something happens that goes wrong in my police department, I'm held ultimately responsible. But I don't always have full control over how that situation is going to be resolved because of civil service rules, because of Peace Officer Bill of Rights rules. And I'm a strong supporter of unions, by the way. I was in a union. But police chiefs and sheriffs need to have more ability to handle problems quickly and effectively. And we don't always have that.
I love that you bring that up because I've given the example way too often. We never get, as chiefs, as administrators of agencies, we never get easy decisions. If they were easy, the sergeant would have taken care of it, the lieutenant would have taken care of it, the captain would have taken care of it. When it comes to you, it's a really sloppy, crappy sandwich, right? And they bring it to you and they say, here you go, Sheriff, which end do you want to take a bite out of? It's never a good decision when it comes to you, ultimately. It's some really complex, really ugly, nasty situation that when it finally comes to you, you don't want to touch it. It's a really complex, highly evolved, bad, quagmire-ish situation by the time it comes to your office. So by the time you've inherited it, there's never a good solution for you to sign off on. You're going to hold your breath and take a bite of that crappy sandwich and just hope for the best. And so it's a good point that you make. Whether we're talking about personnel discipline or you're always making the best out of a really bad situation. Yeah.
That's another game plan, and that's another a solution because we certainly recognize that that's something that needs to change. Once we get the community stepping up to the plate and doing their part, we believe that you will be given that, and I will say it, that power. Because right now, you all should be the final say-so person within your department, because that's the reason you have that position. And I think it's a shame that you don't. To me, it's just rather sad. And that's not how we want our police departments to operate in this country. We shouldn't want that. It's not going to be efficient.
Having worked in several states, you find yourself at odds with the civil service process or even right to work state, some of the processes in place that your agreements with police unions or police organizations have or causes. I, for one, in the off years where we can't necessarily negotiate it, have challenged some of the thinking. And if it's the right thing to do, I do it. Do it right now. And the union, may not be happy about it, but sometimes when an officer is absolutely wrong, right, it's the right thing to do.
Right.
To elevate it. It's the right thing to do to reset the clock for your organization and challenge some of the foolishness that we see out there. And if we don't have the courage to do that, then we're in the wrong profession, because we are expected to lead these organizations through thick and thin. And if I'm going to be responsible for the behavior of folks in my organization, I'm damn sure going to set the parameters for how behavior is going to be, whether it's consistent with some of our contractual obligations or not. And it's important for the organization from the bottom up to know, and for the community to know, that they have someone in place that will hold people responsible for, bad behavior. And that includes our community members. Because I've stood up to people within our community on racially, tenuous situations where, I've stood for things that, the community was against, and said, well, how as a black man can you stand up and say that this was, this was a good thing? Well, it wasn't a good thing. It was lawful but awful, right? It was something that may not rise to the level of this person being terminated, but it rises to the level of this person being punished, and that's where the sword of Damocles hangs over everybody's head as a police chief, right? No matter what you do, that string's getting thinner and thinner, and it's eventually going to fall. But we have to, during the time that we're running organizations, make those decisions. No matter, we have to make the right decision. I'll bring this into perspective, and I won't be very verbose about this. We were taught years ago, each of us are old enough to understand this, by our city attorneys, never make a statement about, what happens in a shooting or a police-related, issue, because we're going to get sued and that's going to be used against you in court. And what we've come to realize now is it's best for us to make a statement. It's best for us to say we don't agree with what we saw. It's inconsistent with the mission, vision, values, and guiding principles of our organization and disciplinary policy, right? These are things we can't condone, because the public expects us to be able to call a spade, and more and more, as a chief, I've learned that the public expects us to call out the public, too. So if we're not doing both, we're doing something wrong. And if we're not establishing the police department's behavioral standards in terms of mission, vision, value, and guiding principles, and that being something that everyone's had a part of, all stakeholders should have a say in what your mission, vision, values, and guiding principles are, then how can you hold people accountable to something that no one had any say about? Part of a strategic planning process is bringing in focus groups, doing the SWOT analysis, and coming up with what direction you're taking as an organization, and how you're going to be backed by everybody involved going in this direction. So I'd encourage people to do that, but I'd also encourage each one of the people here that are sitting here as the police chiefs, especially, to go back to the community and say, hey, we sat down and we said these were the standards that you wanted me as the chief to go by, right? You sat at that table like I did, and we talked about it. Now I'm asking for you to support this decision and to go out and be the best advocates you can for policing within the community. If you expect police officers to treat people with the decency and respect that we expect, realize that officers will make mistakes, but those mistakes don't necessarily rise to the level of, all right, that was a racist action. It can be a mistake. It can be something outside of policy, but it does not necessarily have to be an assault on a minority community.
I like the thing that you said in regards to touching on addressing when things might have been out of pocket or doesn't align with the pillars that the department stands for. ICU really touches on and addresses, as we are learning in a university, learning from one another, learning perspectives that need to be transparent, authentic, and genuine, right? And it's just so important as we're learning how to navigate these gray areas that, and I again, just playing tag, being transparent, authentic, genuine. I guess I represent a certain generation that's seeing that you more seasoned in life have...
How polite. I think he's talking about me.
I hear it all the time.
Not too far.
You gentlemen more seasoned in life in this space of getting a peek of what you all actually think about what's going on in your community, what's going on in the nation, that there is a need to really reset and recalibrate how we're looking at law enforcement, locally at least. The idea of the roundtable was to be able to present an illustration of law enforcement being intentional with their intentions. You mentioned intentional. I love that word. So my phrase has always been, we got to be intentional with our intentions. And right now, we're seeing, at least given my vessel, we don't have a lot of influence. You all know the leaders and the individuals that need to have these conversations to break these barriers. And in order to pass this baton to the next generation, there needs to be something, there needs to be some form of a platform for us to be able to have these conversations so that we can be able to coexist. Because I tell my sons all the time, hey, when I become an old man, you're going to be running the world. So I'm working for you. I have to set this, I got to do my part to set this bad boy up so that you can be functional in society and not just take from society, to contribute something and also to have something to be able to operate on in the structure. So recalibrating set rules of engagement, standards and expectations, and just being transparent and authentic and genuine with how we go about doing that. But I really leaned on my father as my chief consultant, because we've talked about just the way the world is for years. But really, the fact that we're human beings, but you have more in common than the gentlemen around this room. I try to grow a little facial, a little something, but that still sometimes put me in a certain category of, hey, you just got to graduate out of high school. The fact that we have generations that are able to be on the same accord and to see the problem before it becomes just really dire is just so important, to really be able to see and be proactive with that and to be able to uplift one another instead of butting heads. Too much us against them type of narrative. And so I just want to say, just for my part, seeing the ICU framework operate in a space that we can really be able to say, okay, maybe we got to make a list, and maybe we have to go and address certain entities that are hindering the progress that we need to see. If we don't do that, then we just have performative allyship. And that's just being honest. We just have to be honest with what we need to see, who we need to sit down with, those social interactions. We're talking about ultimately that social type of contract that's necessary to make the change. Relationship.
It's been a great morning. And thank you all for your efforts in getting here, things of that nature. Ron, we'll let you close it.
I'm just going to take all this and give it
All
to
right.
you.
That's right. All right. I think I know you guys need to get back to work and things of that nature. So thank you so much for the day. Just to let you know too that we'll put this together and things of that nature and get you all copies and stuff. Also too, before you guys leave too, I got something for you. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Thank you.